What would you do if the very foundation of your dreams was shattered in an instant, leaving you fighting for justice in a world that seemed determined to silence you? The streets of Eastwood were lined with shadows, not just of buildings, but of whispered fears and unspoken truths. Here, in a neighborhood often overlooked and painted with the brush of prejudice, lives Marcus Thompson, a 17-year-old boy with dreams that soared far above the gritty realities of his environment. Marcus is not just another face in the crowd. He is a beacon of hope for his community, a straight-A student with aspirations of becoming a civil rights attorney. His mother, a hard-working nurse, has always instilled in him the belief that education is the path to liberation, a chance to rise above the circumstances that threaten to confine him. Yet beneath his confident smile and unwavering determination lies a vulnerability that gnaws at him, the constant fear of becoming another statistic in a world that too often overlooks young black men. Before we start, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting stories like this one. Comment on which city you're watching from. We want to get to know you and find out how far this story will go. Now, get ready, let's get started. Marcus walks the same streets every day, navigating the complexities of a world that feels both familiar and alien. Eastwood is a microcosm of America, with its vibrant community spirit overshadowed by the lurking presence of systemic injustice. The sound of sirens is a constant reminder of the thin line between safety and danger as police patrols weave through the neighborhood, often with a watchful eye that feels more like a threat than a protection. Despite this, Marcus finds solace in his friends and family who share his aspirations and burdens, creating a tapestry of support and resilience. Yet the harshness of their reality is undeniable. His friends are often targeted by law enforcement, subjected to the weight of suspicion and racial profiling, and Marcus knows all too well that he could easily become another victim. As he steps out of his front door each morning, he feels the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He dreams of college, of walking across the stage in a cap and gown, of becoming a voice for those who have been silenced. But these dreams are often overshadowed by the looming presence of a society that seems to conspire against him. His vulnerability, the fear that he might not be able to escape the clutches of prejudice, fuels his drive, but also threatens to engulf him. The world outside is a battlefield, and every day is a fight for survival, not just against societal norms, but also against the internalized doubts that creep into his mind. The main conflict emerges one fateful afternoon, when a routine encounter spirals into chaos. Marcus is walking home from school, his earbuds in, lost in thoughts of a debate he had with his classmates about justice and equality. Suddenly, he feels a sharp jab of anxiety as he notices a patrol car pull up alongside him. The officer, a man named Jack Reynolds, is known for his aggressive tactics and a reputation that casts a long shadow over Eastwood. Without provocation, Reynolds shouts at Marcus to stop, his voice cold and commanding. Marcus's heart races. He knows that any misstep could be perceived as a threat, but he is just a kid, trying to make his way home. Before he can process the situation, Reynolds, fueled by an unconscious bias and a sense of entitlement, draws his weapon. In a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, a single shot rings out. A sound that shatters the fabric of the community and marks the beginning of a tumultuous chain of events. The bullet finds its mark, but it does not hit just any boy. It strikes Marcus, the son of a working-class family whose dreams now lie bleeding on the pavement. The officer stands frozen, a mix of shock and disbelief etched across his face, while chaos erupts around them. The immediate aftermath is a whirlwind of emotions, panic, anger, and despair. The news spreads like wildfire, igniting outrage and protests across Eastwood. Marcus's mother, upon hearing the news, collapses under the weight of her fears and the reality that her son, her pride and joy, has become yet another casualty in a battle that seems unending. The community rallies in support, their grief transforming into a fierce demand for justice. They march through the streets with signs and chants, their voices rising in unison against the injustices that have plagued them for far too long. The central conflict deepens as the investigation unfolds, revealing layers of systemic corruption and a culture of silence that permeates the police department. Officer Reynolds, once a figure of authority, becomes the face of the very prejudice that Marcus sought to fight against. The community's anger is palpable, but as the days turn into weeks, a new layer of complexity emerges. Marcus's father, the mayor of Eastwood, is thrust into a position where he must confront his own beliefs and the realities of the system he represents. Torn between the desire to protect his family and the need to address the injustice that has befallen his son, he finds himself facing a moral dilemma that threatens to unravel the fabric of his political career. As the narrative unfolds, Marcus's story becomes a powerful commentary on social justice and the fight against systemic racism. Through his experiences, we witness the resilience of a community that has long been marginalized and the strength of a family that refuses to let grief silence their voices. The emotional stakes are high, as Marcus's journey not only reflects his personal struggle, but also serves as a mirror for the societal wounds that need healing. In this fraught landscape, questions arise about accountability, the nature of justice, and the role of privilege in shaping realities. As Marcus fights to reclaim his voice, he forces those around him, including his father, friends, and even Officer Reynolds, to confront their own biases and beliefs. The collision of their worlds sets the stage for a transformation that is as painful as it is necessary, challenging each character to reflect on their actions and the consequences that ripple outward. Thus, the stage is set for a gripping exploration of life, loss, and the pursuit of justice in a world fraught with contradictions. Marcus stands at the center of a storm, a young man whose dreams have been interrupted, yet whose spirit remains unbroken. As he navigates the turbulent waters of grief and anger, the question lingers: how do we rise from the ashes of tragedy to forge a new path forward, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will follow? As the chaos of that fateful day settles into a haunting silence, Marcus lies in the hospital bed, his body tethered to a web of machines that beep and hum with sterile indifference. The pain pulsates through him, a grim reminder of the bullet that shattered not only his flesh, but his very sense of self. The doctors work diligently to keep him alive, but Marcus feels the weight of an unseen force pressing down on him, a suffocating blanket of fear that threatens to consume his dreams. His mother, Angela, is a pillar of strength, her hands trembling as she clutches Marcus's hand, her eyes filled with tears that reflect a grief deeper than words can convey. She is his anchor, yet even her presence cannot shield him from the reality that he is now a symbol of a struggle far greater than himself, a struggle that has ignited a fire in Eastwood and beyond. The community gathers outside the hospital, their voices a chorus of anger and grief, demanding justice for Marcus and for all those who have suffered at the hands of a system designed to oppress. Strangers unite in solidarity, their signs held high, their chants echoing in the air like a battle cry. But within the confines of his hospital room, Marcus battles a different enemy: doubt. As he lies there, he hears snippets of conversations from the nurses, snippets of the outrage that has erupted outside. He feels the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He is no longer just Marcus Thompson, the straight-A student, the dreamer. He has become a symbol of the fight for justice, and that terrifies him. What if he cannot rise to the occasion? What if he is too broken to be the voice his community desperately needs? In the days that follow, the emotional turmoil deepens. The hospital becomes a revolving door of visitors, each carrying their own burdens of grief and hope. His best friend Jamal arrives, his face a mask of anger and despair. "They can't get away with this, Marcus. We're going to make sure of it, he vows, his voice low and fierce. But as he speaks, Marcus can see the flicker of fear in Jamal's eyes, the same fear that gnaws at him, the fear that their fight may be in vain. Jamal's presence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, he brings a sense of camaraderie that Marcus desperately needs, yet on the other, he embodies the reality of their shared vulnerability. Jamal's father had been a victim of police violence years before, and the scars of that loss are still fresh. The weight of their shared history looms over their friendship, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. As the protests grow louder outside, so too does the pressure on Marcus's family. His father, the mayor, is thrust into the spotlight, forced to navigate the treacherous waters of public opinion while grappling with his own emotions. The tension between family loyalty and political duty creates a rift that is palpable. Marcus can see it in the way his father's brow furrows as he walks into the hospital room, the conflict etched on his face. The mayor arrives with a stack of papers in hand, filled with the language of politics, but all Marcus can focus on is the pain in his father's eyes. Marcus, I need you to understand. This could change everything for our family. I'm trying to protect you, to protect us, his father says, his voice strained. But the truth is, Marcus feels more like a pawn in his father's game. He wants to scream, to tell his father that this isn't just about politics for him. It's his life, his future, that hangs in the balance. Yet the words catch in his throat, trapped by a sense of loyalty that feels heavy and suffocating. Days drift into a blur, and Marcus's body begins to heal, but his spirit remains fractured. The whispers of doubt grow louder, echoing in his mind. What if he isn't strong enough to fight? What if the community's hope rests on shoulders that can't bear the weight? As he wrestles with these internal battles, he finds solace in the small moments, the way the sunlight filters through the hospital window, the sound of his mother's gentle humming, the laughter of children playing outside. Then, a surprise visit from a local activist named Maya shifts the trajectory of his thoughts. Maya, a fierce advocate for social justice, has been instrumental in organizing the protests. Her passion is infectious, and as she speaks, Marcus feels a flicker of something he thought lost. Hope. This isn't just about you, Marcus. It's about all of us. You have a voice, and it matters, she urges, her eyes blazing with conviction. Maya becomes a mentor of sorts, guiding Marcus through the maze of emotions he navigates daily. She introduces him to the concept of resilience, not just as a passive endurance of pain, but as an active, defiant choice to rise up against injustice. Yet, their friendship is not without its challenges. Maya is relentless in her pursuit of justice, often pushing Marcus out of his comfort zone, prompting him to confront his fears head-on. There are moments when he resents her insistence, moments when he longs for the simplicity of his previous life, when his biggest worry was acing his exams. Despite the friction, Marcus cannot deny the strength he draws from Maya's unwavering belief in him. She challenges him to write, an act that feels both liberating and daunting. In the quiet moments of his recovery, he starts to pen his thoughts, pouring the raw emotions of his experience onto the page. It becomes a form of therapy, a way to reclaim his narrative in a world that seeks to define him by his circumstances. However, as the protests intensify, so does the backlash. Not everyone in Eastwood is supportive of the movement, and Marcus finds himself facing hostility from those who view his struggle as a threat to the status quo. One evening, as he and Jamal leave the hospital after a long day of strategizing with Maya, they are confronted by a group of young men who hurl insults and threats in their direction. The encounter is jarring, and for Marcus, it crystallizes the reality of his situation, a reality that is fraught with danger and uncertainty. "Let's just go," Jamal urges, his voice low and tense, but Marcus feels a surge of defiance. "No, we can't back down. Not now," he replies, his voice steadier than he feels inside. The confrontation forces him to confront the darker undercurrents of his community, a reminder that not everyone shares his vision for justice. This moment becomes a turning point for Marcus. He realizes that the fight for justice is not just about reclaiming his voice, it's about confronting the fears that threaten to silence him. As he stands there, heart pounding, he feels a shift within himself, a burgeoning sense of purpose that begins to drown out the doubt. It is an awakening, a recognition that the path ahead will be fraught with challenges, but also with opportunities for growth and connection. As he returns to the hospital, a sense of resolve settles within him. He is determined to not only recover, but to rise as a beacon for his community. The stakes are high, but so too is the potential for change. And while the road ahead is uncertain, Marcus knows that he is not alone. With the support of his family, friends, and newfound allies, he begins to envision a future where his voice and the voices of those like him can no longer be silenced. In the weeks that follow, the protests grow larger, the community more united. Each march becomes an act of defiance against the systemic injustices that have plagued them for generations. Marcus stands among them, no longer just a symbol of tragedy, but a living testament to resilience. As he raises his voice in solidarity with his community, he understands that the fight for justice is not just about one boy. It's about the collective strength of a community that refuses to be overlooked. The journey ahead will test him in ways he cannot yet imagine, but for the first time in a long while, Marcus feels a flicker of hope, a belief that, together, they can rewrite their narrative and forge a new path toward justice. As the weeks rolled on, the weight of the world pressed down on Marcus more heavily than ever. The protests outside the hospital had become a near-daily occurrence, each one a reminder of the fight that had transformed him into a symbol of hope and resistance. Yet with each march, the complexity of his situation deepened, introducing challenges that threatened to unravel the fragile sense of purpose he was beginning to build. Amidst the fervor of activism, Marcus's body was healing, but his mind was a battlefield. The growing tensions within Eastwood were palpable. The local government, feeling the pressure from the protests, began to push back. Marcus watched helplessly as news reports showed police forming barricades around the hospital, a stark contrast to the peaceful gatherings of his supporters. The atmosphere shifted from one of solidarity to one charged with fear and hostility. He could feel it in the air, the simmering resentment of those who believed that the movement was overstepping its bounds, threatening their way of life. One evening, a particularly heated protest escalated into chaos. Marcus, now able to sit up in bed, witnessed it all through his window. The shouts of the crowd turned into screams as tensions boiled over. Angered by the police presence, some protesters clashed with the officers, and the scene devolved into confusion and panic. The sound of sirens filled the night, drowning out the chants that had once felt so powerful. Marcus felt a wave of nausea as he recognized the faces of friends among the crowd, their determination now mingled with fear. The next day, news broke that Jamal had been arrested during the rally. This twist struck Marcus like a physical blow. The thought of his best friend locked away, facing potential charges that could ruin his future, filled him with dread. He fought against the wave of guilt that crashed over him, wondering if he had inadvertently led Jamal into danger with his own burgeoning activism. The very foundation of their friendship felt threatened as Marcus grappled with the idea that his decisions could have dire consequences for those he loved most. Angela, too, felt the strain of the situation. Desperate to support her son, she pushed for legal representation for Jamal, but resources were limited, and the financial burden of legal fees became another source of tension in their household. Marcus could see the exhaustion etched on her face, the way her shoulders sagged under the weight of worry for both her son and his best friend. It was a heavy reminder that their struggle was not just political, It was deeply personal, intertwining their fates with the larger narrative of injustice. As the days dragged on, the emotional toll of these developments began to manifest physically. Marcus found himself feeling drained, a deep fatigue settling into his bones. The pain in his body was a constant reminder of his trauma, but now it was compounded by the emotional strain of watching those around him suffer. He began to lose interest in the writing that had been a source of solace. The words that had once flowed so freely now felt trapped within him, buried beneath layers of anxiety and despair. Maya continued to visit, her energy unwavering in the face of adversity. Yet with each visit, Marcus could sense a tension brewing between them. She pushed him to speak out, to join her in organizing more rallies, but he hesitated. "What if something happens to me too?" he confessed one day, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "What if I end up like Jamal?" Maya's expression softened, but her resolve remained firm. "You can't let fear dictate your actions, Marcus. We need you. Your voice matters." Yet, as she spoke, Marcus felt a wall rising between them, a chasm defined by their differing approaches to the fight. While Maya was relentless, driven by a fierce passion, Marcus found himself grappling with a paralyzing fear that threatened to silence him. As his internal conflict deepened, the external pressures mounted. The community's demands for justice grew louder, but so too did the backlash. The local media began to paint a different picture of the protests. Articles appeared that framed the demonstrators as violent agitators, undermining the movement's message. Marcus felt the frustration boil within him, the sensation of being misrepresented gnawing at his resolve. Amidst this turmoil, another unexpected twist emerged. The mayor announced a town hall meeting, promising to address concerns from both sides of the debate. The event was billed as a chance for open dialogue, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that it was a political maneuver, a way to placate the community without making any real change. As the date approached, he wrestled with the decision to attend. Would his presence lend legitimacy to a facade, or could it serve as a beacon of hope to those who needed it? Jamal's impending trial loomed over him, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. With each passing day, Marcus felt the pressure to speak out grow heavier. He could see the toll it took on his mother, the way she lost weight and sleep, consumed by worry. The tension in their home was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the chaos unfolding outside. Then came the final blow. A letter from Jamal, handwritten on worn paper, arrived at the hospital. Its simple words were filled with fear and uncertainty, but also a fierce determination to fight. "I won't let them break me, Marcus. But I need you to stay strong. You're my voice out there. Don't let them silence you." Reading Jamal's words ignited something within Marcus. He realized that his struggle was not just for himself, but for Jamal and everyone else who had faced injustice. Yet with this realization came a wave of self-doubt. What if he failed? What if his voice wasn't enough? In the days that followed, he faced a choice that would define his path. The town hall meeting loomed, and with it a chance to confront the very system that had wrought so much pain. With Maya's encouragement and Jamal's unwavering belief in him, he committed to attending. He would stand before the community, not just as a survivor, but as a voice for those who had been silenced. The night before the meeting, Marcus lay in bed, anxiety coursing through him. He was torn between the fear of failure and the desire to rise, to be the beacon of hope his community needed. As he closed his eyes, he whispered a silent prayer for strength, for clarity, hoping that in the morning he would find the courage to stand up not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless. The next day, as he prepared for the town hall, he felt an unfamiliar sense of resolve wash over him. He dressed carefully, choosing a simple but powerful outfit, one that represented both his identity and his fight. He could feel the energy of the community outside, their voices a steady drumbeat that urged him forward. The time had come for him to confront his fears and embrace the struggle that lay ahead, knowing that he was not alone. In that moment, Marcus understood that this journey would not be easy and the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But he was ready to face it, ready to reclaim his narrative and fight for justice, not just for himself, but for all those who had been silenced. The path to change was daunting, but as he took a deep breath and stepped into the sunlight, he felt the warmth of solidarity surrounding him. It was time to rise. As the day of the town hall meeting dawned, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Marcus could feel it in his bones as he wheeled himself towards the hospital exit, the bright sun, a stark contrast to the heavy shadow of doubt that loomed over him. He had spent the night wrestling with his thoughts, the weight of Jamal's letter echoing in his mind. It was a simple declaration of strength, yet it felt monumental. A reminder that he was not just fighting for himself, but for a friend whose freedom now hinged on their collective courage. When he arrived at the town hall, the building buzzed with energy, filled with people who had come to voice their frustrations, hopes, and fears. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable mix of hope and anxiety. Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself that he was not alone. The community had gathered for a shared purpose. As he rolled through the crowd, he met the eyes of familiar faces, each one reflecting a similar determination to confront the injustices they faced. The meeting began, and the atmosphere shifted as the mayor took the podium. His polished words dripped with political jargon, promising to listen while subtly dismissing the urgency of the community's demands. The growing restlessness among the crowd was evident, murmurs of discontent rising like a wave. Marcus felt his heart race as he watched the mayor deflect questions, his tone dismissive and condescending. This was not the dialogue the community needed. This was a facade of engagement. Then, without warning, a protester stood up, their voice cracking with emotion as they recounted the story of a family member wrongfully imprisoned. The raw honesty of their plea pierced through the carefully curated atmosphere, igniting the crowd. Marcus watched as others joined in, sharing their stories of loss and injustice, their voices crescendoing into a powerful chorus that echoed within the walls of the town hall. It was a moment of collective awakening, a powerful realization that they were not just speaking to the mayor, but to each other, affirming their shared struggle. In that moment, something shifted within Marcus. The fear that had gripped him began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce resolve. He realized that the time for silence had passed. He could no longer afford to hide behind his doubts. As he watched the community rally around one another, he felt the urge to join them, to lend his voice to the fight. The pain he had carried for so long transformed into determination, igniting a fire within him. When the crowd began to chant for justice, Marcus seized the opportunity. With a surge of adrenaline, he pushed himself forward, navigating through the throng until he found himself at the front. The eyes of the audience turned towards him, expectant and urgent. He felt an overwhelming wave of vulnerability wash over him, but also a deep sense of purpose. This was his moment. "Listen," he shouted, his voice trembling yet resolute. "We can't let fear silence us. Jamal is counting on us to fight for him, and we owe it to ourselves to demand change." His words flew out, raw and unfiltered, igniting a spark of solidarity in the crowd. The emotional impact of his declaration was immediate. The energy shifted as people began to rally around him, echoing his call for justice. Marcus felt a rush of relief mixed with exhilaration. He was no longer just a passive observer, but an active participant in this fight. The weight of his fears began to lift, replaced by the strength of community and shared purpose. As he spoke, he could see the faces of his friends and family, their expressions a mixture of pride and encouragement. This was not merely about him. It was a collective movement, a manifestation of resilience and hope. He felt the support of Jamal's spirit urging him forward, a reminder that they were in this together. Yet the moment was not without its challenges. As Marcus continued to speak, the mayor's expression hardened, and he raised his hand to silence the crowd. "We cannot condone this behavior. We must maintain order," he barked, his voice dripping with authority. But the tide of the crowd was stronger. They had come too far to back down now, and they were determined to make their voices heard. With each passing second, the stakes rose. The mayor's attempt to regain control was met with resistance, and Marcus could feel the undercurrents of tension lurking just beneath the surface. The crowd was emboldened, but he sensed the danger of the moment escalating. It was a precarious situation, one that could erupt into chaos if not handled carefully. In that pivotal instant, Marcus realized that the fight for justice was not just about standing up, it was also about strategy and unity. He remembered Jamal's words about resilience and strength, urging him forward. "We need to be organized. We need to channel this energy into a movement that cannot be ignored," he shouted, rallying the crowd to focus their anger into actionable steps. The emotional shift within him was profound. He had moved from a place of fear to one of empowerment. As he continued to speak, he felt a connection with those around him, a bond forged in shared struggle and collective hope. They were no longer just individuals. They were a community united in purpose. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus knew that the turning point had arrived. The event had shifted not only his perspective, but the entire trajectory of their movement. He felt invigorated by the possibilities that lay ahead, a newfound sense of responsibility to lead and inspire others. The challenges were immense, but the prospect of change felt tangible, almost within reach. With the crowd dispersing, Marcus understood that this was only the beginning. The town hall meeting had ignited a flame that could not be extinguished, a call to action that would resonate far beyond this moment. He had transformed from a frightened victim into a determined advocate, ready to confront the injustices that plagued his community. As he wheeled himself back towards the hospital, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He had found his voice, and with it, the strength to stand for those who had been silenced. The battle for justice was just beginning, and together they would rise to meet it. As the days passed after the town hall meeting, Marcus felt the weight of the community's hopes resting heavily on his shoulders. He had ignited a spark, but now it was time to fan the flames of that energy into something more formidable. The urgency of Jamal's situation loomed over him, and as he prepared for the next steps, he found himself consumed by a mixture of determination and anxiety. Each evening, he gathered with a small group of friends who had become his closest allies in this fight. Among them was Lisa, a fierce advocate for social justice who had spent years organizing protests and community outreach programs. Her passion was contagious, and her unwavering support fortified Marcus's resolve. They sat together in Marcus's living room, papers strewn across the coffee table, charts detailing their strategies for the upcoming rally. "Marcus," Lisa said, her voice steady but insistent, "we need to make sure that everyone knows what's at stake. This isn't just about Jamal, it's about all of us. We must show the mayor that we're not backing down." Her eyes sparked with determination, and Marcus could feel the infectious energy radiating from her. "I know," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what if we're not enough? What if we don't get the turnout we need?" The fear crept back in, whispering doubts into his mind. "Fear is what they want us to feel," Lisa countered, leaning closer. "You've already shown them we won't stay silent. You inspired the crowd. We need to channel that energy into action. We're planning rallies, social media campaigns, and community meetings. We need unity." With every word, Marcus felt the flickers of hope reignite in his chest. He knew the community would rally together, but he also understood the fragility of their resolve. It was a delicate balance, and he was acutely aware of how easily things could spiral out of control. As the days turned into a week, the group continued to strategize, rallying support from local businesses and community leaders. They created flyers, planned speeches, and organized workshops to educate others about the injustices that had plagued their town for too long. Each meeting fortified their bonds, weaving together a tapestry of diverse voices united for a common cause. The night before the rally, Marcus sat alone on the edge of his bed, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The fears he had battled since the beginning of his journey crept back in, whispering doubts about his capability to lead. What if he faltered? What if he lost the momentum they had built? But then he remembered Jamal. He remembered the laughter they had shared, the dreams they had woven together, and the strength Jamal had shown even in the darkest of times. It was a reminder that this fight was not just about him. It was about a community yearning for justice. He couldn't allow his fears to overshadow their collective struggle. In that moment of contemplation, Marcus found clarity. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he recalled the faces of those who had stood beside him at the town hall. He thought of Lisa with her unwavering determination and the stories of families who had shared their pain. They were counting on him, and he needed to rise to the occasion. The next morning, Marcus gathered his friends, and they made their way to the park where the rally was to take place. The air was electric, charged with anticipation as people began to gather. He felt a swell of pride as he looked around at the crowd, a kaleidoscope of faces reflecting the diversity and unity of their community. But just as they began to organize, Marcus noticed a familiar face appearing at the edge of the crowd. Dave, a former friend turned adversary, who had openly supported the mayor's policies. The sight of him sent a jolt of unease through Marcus. He could feel the tension in the air shift with Dave's presence, and a knot formed in his stomach. "Why is he here?" Marcus muttered under his breath, his heart racing. "Don't let him shake you," Lisa urged, noticing the shift in his demeanor. "We've come too far to let anyone derail us now. Just focus on the message." As the rally began, Marcus took center stage, his heart pounding with the weight of the moment. He scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces, drawing strength from their presence. He began to speak, pouring his heart into every word, sharing the stories of injustice and calling for solidarity. But as he spoke, he felt a ripple of dissent emerge from the crowd. Dave had begun to shout over him, challenging his words and attempting to sway the audience with counter-arguments. "This is just a ploy. You're all being manipulated," he yelled, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The crowd shifted, uncertainty creeping in as murmurs echoed around them. Marcus felt the heat of anger and fear rise within him, but he also felt the strength of the community surrounding him. The moment was pivotal. He needed to redirect that energy back to the purpose of their gathering. "Listen!" Marcus boomed, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Dave's words are meant to divide us, but we are here for a reason. We are here because we believe in justice. We believe in our community." The crowd began to rally behind him again, echoing his words and drowning out Dave's dissent. In that moment, Marcus realized that the strength of the community lay not just in their unified voices, but in their ability to stand against division. As the rally reached its peak, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He had faced his fears, confronted his doubts, and emerged stronger for it. The rally was a testament to the power of solidarity and the resilience of their shared struggle. But just when it seemed they were gaining ground, an unexpected event unfolded. A group of counter-protesters arrived, brandishing signs that read, "Enough of the lies" and "Justice for all." Their presence shifted the dynamics of the rally, and tension escalated as both sides began to clash. In that moment, Marcus felt a wave of panic wash over him. This was not how it was supposed to go. The chaos threatened to unravel everything they had worked for, and he could see the fear in the eyes of his friends and allies. "Stay calm," Marcus shouted, trying to rein in the crowd's emotions. "We're here for peace. This is about togetherness, not violence." As he spoke, he felt Lisa's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "We need to show them our strength, Marcus. Let's stand together," she urged, her voice a beacon of calm amid the chaos. The rally shifted as they united in defiance of the counter-protesters, creating a wall of solidarity. In that moment, Marcus felt the collective strength of the community behind him, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. They were a force to be reckoned with, and together they would stand firm against any opposition. As the rally continued, Marcus felt a profound sense of transformation. He had confronted his fears, embraced his role as a leader, and realized the importance of unity in the face of adversity. The unexpected challenges had only strengthened their resolve, and he knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. With renewed determination, Marcus took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. He had found his voice and his purpose, and he was prepared to lead his community toward the justice they so desperately sought. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready to fight for Jamal and for all those who had been silenced. The final confrontation awaited them, and together they would rise to meet it. As the confrontation intensified, Marcus stood at the center of the rally, surrounded by a sea of supporters whose faces reflected a mix of determination and anxiety. The counter-protesters, led by Dave, escalated their taunts and shouts, attempting to drown out the voices advocating for justice. Marcus felt his heart racing, pounding in tandem with the chorus of dissent that threatened to tear apart the fragile unity they had fought so hard to build. In that critical moment, Marcus faced his greatest challenge. It was not just Dave's vocal opposition or the presence of the counter-protesters. It was the fear that his message, his fight, might be overshadowed by chaos. He could feel the weight of his community's hopes hanging in the balance, and the stakes had never been higher. Jamal's future and the futures of countless others depended on their ability to stand firm against the tide of division. As the shouting escalated, Marcus recalled the lessons he had learned throughout this journey. He remembered the power of unity that had brought them together, the strength in vulnerability that had allowed him to share his fears, and the determination in Lisa's voice that had inspired him to lead. Now, he needed to embody that spirit and transform the energy of the crowd into a force for good. "Everyone, please!" Marcus called out, raising his hands to quiet the tumult. The crowd began to hush, their eyes shifting toward him. "This is not about us versus them. This is about our community. This is about Jamal and the countless others who have faced injustices. We cannot let anger divide us. We must stand together." His voice rang clear, cutting through the noise like a beacon of hope. But even as he spoke, he could see Dave at the forefront of the counter-protesters, a smug smirk on his face as he shouted back, "You're just a pawn. This is a waste of time. You'll never win." The taunt stung. But instead of crumbling under the weight of Dave's words, Marcus felt a surge of defiance. He realized that this was not just about proving Dave wrong, it was about affirming the strength of their cause. "Dave, you say we're wasting our time, but look around you. This crowd represents hope, resilience, and the fight for justice," Marcus shouted back, his voice unwavering. "We are not here to be pawns. We are the architects of our own future." With every word, the crowd began to rally behind him again, their energy returning as they chanted slogans of solidarity. The chants grew louder, drowning out the dissenters, and Marcus felt the power of their unity wash over him. He had transformed fear into strength and uncertainty into resolve. Just as the momentum seemed to sway in favor of the rally, a sudden clash erupted at the edge of the crowd. A scuffle broke out between some of the supporters and the counter-protesters, and Marcus's heart sank. This was the chaos he had feared, the very thing that could derail their efforts. Panic surged through him as he scanned the crowd, searching for Lisa and his allies. "Stay together! We're stronger as one!" he shouted, pushing through the throng to reach the front lines of the chaos. His legs felt heavy, but the sight of his friends fighting to maintain order propelled him forward. As he reached them, he saw Lisa standing her ground, her voice firm as she tried to mediate. "Let's not give in to violence. We're here for change," she shouted, but the situation was spiraling out of control. "Marcus!" Lisa called out, her eyes wide with urgency. "We need you to bring everyone back together." In that moment, Marcus understood. This was not just a rally, it was a test of their resolve. He needed to create a space for dialogue, a moment where fear could transform into understanding. He stepped onto a nearby platform, elevating himself above the fray, and raised his hands once again. "Listen to me," he bellowed, his voice carrying over the noise. "We are all human beings. We all want to feel safe, to be heard, to belong. This fight is not against each other. It is against the system that has failed us all. Let's take a breath and remember why we're here." The crowd began to quiet, their attention shifting toward him. He could see the doubt in some faces, but he also saw flickers of hope. Slowly, he felt the tension begin to dissipate as people turned their energy from anger to reflection. "Let's channel our frustration into something constructive," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "Let's talk about what justice looks like for all of us. We can disagree without hate. We can demand change without violence." As he spoke, a wave of emotion washed over him, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. He could see the fear in the eyes of his friends and supporters, the uncertainty that gripped them. But he also saw resolve beginning to take root. One by one, people began to put down their signs and step back from the confrontation, choosing to listen instead. Dave's face twisted in anger as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. "You're just making excuses. You'll never change anything," he shouted, but his voice was growing weaker, drowned out by the growing solidarity among the crowd. "Maybe you're right, Dave," Marcus replied, his heart racing, "but we won't stop trying. Together, we can create a community that fights for justice, that embraces diversity, and that stands against oppression. We are the change we seek." With those words, the crowd erupted in applause, the energy shifting once more as they rallied around the message of hope and unity. The conflict began to dissolve, and even some of the counter-protesters looked uncertain, caught off guard by the community's resilience. In that moment of clarity, Marcus realized that the greatest obstacle he had faced was not just the opposition from Dave or the counter-protesters. It was the fear of division within his own community. But by confronting that fear and embracing the lessons he had learned about solidarity, he was able to transform the narrative. As the rally continued, Marcus felt a sense of triumph wash over him. They had faced chaos and division, but they had emerged stronger, united in their purpose. His heart swelled with pride as he looked around at the faces of his friends and supporters, each one reflecting the strength of their collective struggle. The outcome of the rally was a resounding success, not just in numbers, but in spirit. They had proven that even in the face of adversity, they could rise together, channeling their fears into a powerful force for change. Jamal's situation was still precarious, but now they had a renewed sense of purpose and solidarity to fight for justice. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus felt a profound sense of transformation within himself. He had faced his fears, embraced his role as a leader, and witnessed the power of community in action. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but it had also brought him closer to those he cared about, forging bonds that would withstand the test of time. In the aftermath of the rally, as the sun set over the park casting a golden hue across the gathering, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. They had ignited a movement, and together they would continue to fight for justice, not just for Jamal, but for all those who had been silenced. The battle was far from over, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready to lead his community forward, united and unwavering, As the crowd slowly dissipated, Marcus felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash over him. The immediate chaos had been quelled, and he could see the faces around him reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. His heart still raced from the intensity of the confrontation, but now it raced with the thrill of having turned the tide, of having transformed fear into solidarity. Lisa approached him, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You did it, Marcus. You brought everyone back together," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. In that moment he could see the strength and empowerment in her eyes, a reflection of the journey they had both taken. Their bond had deepened. They were no longer just friends, but co-conspirators in a movement that demanded change. Marcus smiled, feeling the warmth of their connection. "We did it," he corrected her. "This was all of us. I couldn't have done it without everyone standing together." He glanced at the remnants of the rally, discarded signs and remnants of the crowd's energy, and felt a swell of gratitude for the community that had stood by him. As the night fell, Marcus and his friends gathered at a nearby cafe, the atmosphere buzzing with post-rally energy. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of reflection. Jamal's situation was still precarious, but the rally had sparked conversations in the community, and hope flickered anew. Marcus felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that their actions had ignited something larger than himself. In the days that followed, the impact of the rally rippled through the community. The local news covered the event extensively, showcasing the unity and strength of the supporters. Conversations about justice and equality filled the air, and for the first time, Marcus felt that their voices were being heard. The energy of the rally hadn't just dissipated, it had sparked a movement. Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned throughout this journey. He had entered the rally filled with fear and uncertainty, but he had emerged as a leader, someone who could harness anger and frustration into a call for understanding and change. He now understood that vulnerability was not a weakness. It was a strength that had allowed him to connect with others and inspire them to join the fight. Dave, too, had been affected. The smug confidence he had once displayed began to fade as he witnessed the community rallying around Marcus's message. Several of his own supporters began to question their motives, and cracks in the facade of his leadership became evident. Marcus realized that while he had not swayed Dave's beliefs, he had planted seeds of doubt within his ranks, forcing them to confront the reality of their actions. In the weeks that followed, Marcus worked closely with Lisa and other community leaders to organize workshops focused on healing and dialogue. They addressed the underlying issues that had led to the divisions in their community, and slowly, bridges began to form. The discussions were not always easy. They were often fraught with tension and disagreement. But Marcus had learned the value of patience and listening, the importance of creating a space where every voice could be heard. As the movement grew, so did his sense of purpose. He found himself spending late nights drafting speeches, organizing events, and connecting with other activists who shared their vision for change. Each conversation, each rally, built on the last, and soon the momentum became undeniable. Yet, amid the whirlwind of activity, Marcus experienced moments of deep contemplation. He often found himself sitting in quiet corners of the park where the rally had taken place, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. He thought about how far he had come, from a young man overwhelmed by fear to someone who had learned to harness the collective power of his community. It was a transformation fueled by resilience and hope. He also took time to think about Jamal. The young man remained at the forefront of his mind, a constant reminder of the fight they were engaged in. Marcus visited him regularly, sharing stories of the changes taking place in the community and keeping his spirits high. Through these visits, he witnessed the tangible impact of their efforts. Jamal's health improved, and he began to regain some semblance of hope for the future. It was a reminder that their fight was not just about justice. It was about the lives that were affected. As the season turned, Marcus found himself at the forefront of a larger movement advocating for systemic change. The conversations they had ignited spread beyond their community, inspiring others to join the cause. He began to see the fruits of their labor as more people rallied to the message of unity and justice. The experience had not been without its challenges. There were moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, Marcus learned that every setback was an opportunity for growth, and every challenge was a chance to inspire others. He became a beacon of hope, someone who could channel the collective anger and pain into a movement that demanded justice. In his quieter moments, he reflected on the journey, the sacrifices made, the friendships forged, and the lessons learned. He understood that this was only the beginning. The fight for justice would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was ready to lead with compassion and understanding. As the leaves began to change colors, Marcus stood at the edge of the park where their rally had taken place. He took a deep breath, looking out at the community that had rallied around him. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that they had created something beautiful from the chaos. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, united in their purpose. With renewed determination, he turned back toward the heart of the community, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey would continue, but he was no longer alone. He had a community, a movement, and a vision for a better future. Together, they would keep fighting for justice, for each other, and for the lives of those who had been silenced for too long. The days grew shorter as autumn settled in, its chill a reminder of the fleeting nature of time. Marcus stood before the gathering of community members, the energy in the air palpable, a tapestry of diverse voices united in a shared vision. He had witnessed firsthand how fear could be transformed into strength, how anger could fuel a movement for justice. As he prepared to speak, he felt the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders, a burden he now embraced with pride. The journey had not come without its losses. Alongside the victories were the heart-wrenching moments of grief, the faces of those who had been lost to injustice. Marcus carried them with him, their memories a silent vow to continue the fight. He thought of Jamal, still in recovery, but slowly regaining his spirit. His laughter echoed in Marcus's mind, a reminder of what was at stake. There was still a long road ahead, but they had made significant strides, and that was a testament to their collective resolve. As he spoke, Marcus's voice resonated with the crowd, filled with conviction and hope. "This movement is about more than just us," he declared, his words igniting flames of inspiration among the audience. "It's about every single person who has ever felt marginalized, forgotten, or unheard. Together, we are rewriting the narrative. We are standing up for justice, for equality, and for a future where our children can thrive without fear." Among the faces in the crowd, Lisa stood, her expression a mixture of admiration and determination. She had become a pillar of strength within the community, her fierce advocacy a driving force behind their shared mission. Together, they had forged a partnership rooted in empathy and resilience, each pushing the other to rise higher, to reach further. It was in these moments that they understood the true power of collaboration. They were not just allies, but a family bound by a cause, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Yet, as the rally came to a close, Marcus felt an unsettling sense of bittersweet victory. They had accomplished so much, but he knew the fight was far from over. The very systems they sought to dismantle were deeply entrenched, and the road ahead was littered with obstacles. There would be setbacks, moments that tested their resolve, and challenges that would threaten to pull them apart. But in that very understanding lay the strength to persevere. As Marcus looked at the sea of faces, he found himself reflecting on the lessons learned. Each struggle had shaped him. Each encounter had transformed him. He had learned that vulnerability was a catalyst for connection, that sharing one's truth could ignite the fire of change. The movement they had built together was not just a response to injustice, it was a celebration of their humanity, a testament to the power of solidarity. Days turned into weeks, and the movement continued to grow. They organized community forums and educational workshops, engaging individuals in conversations that challenged their beliefs and broadened their perspectives. Marcus found himself in a continuous cycle of learning, listening to the stories of others, and understanding that every voice mattered in the quest for justice. But amidst the progress, there was still the specter of Dave looming in the background. His influence had waned, but the remnants of his ideology still clung to some individuals in the community, trying to sow discord. Marcus knew that change was not just about winning hearts, it was also about dismantling the structures of hate and division. He reminded himself that every moment of doubt from those who once supported Dave was an opportunity to engage, to educate, and to invite them into the light of understanding. As winter approached, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that true victory was not measured solely by immediate results, but by the seeds of change they had planted in the hearts of those around them. He envisioned a future where their children would inherit a world filled with compassion and equity, a world where they would not have to fight the same battles. On a particularly cold evening, Marcus sat with Lisa and a few other community leaders in a warm cafe, the kind of place that felt like home. They shared stories of their challenges and triumphs, laughter mingling with the scent of coffee. It was in these moments of connection that Marcus found solace, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. They were a community, bound together by shared experiences and a collective vision for a better world. As the light from the cafe spilled out into the darkening street, Marcus felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He knew that every battle fought, every tear shed, and every moment of triumph had brought them to this point. They had created something beautiful from the chaos, a movement built on love and resilience. But he also understood that with victory came the responsibility to continue advocating for those who still suffered in silence. As he left the cafe, he paused outside, looking up at the stars twinkling in the night sky. A bittersweet smile crossed his face as he recognized the weight of what lay ahead. Yes, they had achieved much, but the journey was ongoing. There would be more rallies, more discussions, and undoubtedly more moments of pain. Yet, with each step forward, he felt a deep sense of hope. In that moment, he made a silent promise to himself and to the community he cherished. They would keep fighting, not just for justice, but for understanding, compassion, and healing. They would continue to raise their voices, ensuring that the light of hope shone brightly even in the darkest of times. As he turned to walk home, Marcus felt a shift within him. He was no longer just a young man filled with uncertainty. He had evolved into a leader, a catalyst for change. He envisioned a future where their efforts would inspire others to rise, to join the movement for justice, and to stand in solidarity against oppression. With each step, Marcus embraced the bittersweet nature of victory, knowing that while the cost was high, the rewards were immeasurable. He had found his purpose, and with it, a community ready to face the challenges ahead. They would move forward together, not just as individuals, but as a collective force for good. As he approached his home, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had led him here. It was a journey marked by struggle, growth, and transformation. And while the fight for justice would continue, he was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that they had already made a significant impact. In the quiet of the night, he whispered a silent prayer for those who had been lost, for those still fighting, and for the hope that danced just beyond the horizon. The story was far from over, and he was prepared to write the next chapter with courage and conviction. This journey had shown him that change was possible, that hope could flourish even in the darkest of times. It had taught him the value of community, the power of unity, and the strength that lay in vulnerability. And as he stepped into the future, he carried those lessons with him, ready to inspire others, to join in the fight for a more just and compassionate world. "Your struggle is not in vain," he thought, feeling the warmth of determination swell within him. "Together, we will rise." As he closed the door behind him, Marcus knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he was no longer afraid. He had found his voice, his community, and his purpose. This was just the beginning, and the possibilities were endless.